Good afternoon. Secretary-General is going to say a few words, and after we're going to open the floor for questions.
Ladies and gentlemen of the media, I thank President Ramaphosa and the people of South Africa for their warm welcome and for hosting the G20 Summit. My message to G20 leaders over the next 2 days is simple. Now is the time for leadership and vision. We are living through tumultuous times, conflicts, climate chaos, economic uncertainty, mounting debt, inequality, and the collapse in global aid are inflicting massive suffering around the world. And rising military expenditure is drawing resources away from development. As the world's largest economies, the G20 can hold enormous influence to ease suffering, ensure that economic growth is widely shared, and set out our world on a better, more peaceful course for the future. The theme of this year's meeting, Solidarity, Equality and Sustainability, points the way. Over the next 2 days, I will call on G20 members to use their leverage to lead the action we need. First, we need economic action. Developing countries, in particular in Africa, are suffering from a perfect storm of shrinking fiscal space, crashing debt burdens, and a global financial architecture that is failing to support or even represent them adequately. Africa has been a double victim of colonialism, first through centuries of exploitation and plunder, and then again when international institutions were created, when most countries, African countries, were still under colonial rule and their voices were absent from the table. Today, Africa remains woefully underrepresented across global institutions, and this must change. The Pact for the Future, adopted by Member States last year, called for a reform of global financial institutions. Many decisions are disproportionately in the hands of some of the members of G20 across the governance bodies of these institutions. Africa must have a fair seat in every forum where decisions are made, from the board of international financial institutions to permanent seats in the United Nations Security Council and to other global bodies. And the G20 can help repair this historic injustice and drive reforms that give developing countries, and Africa in particular, a real voice in shaping global policies and make global economic governance more inclusive, representative, equitable, and effective in the years ahead. I will also urge G20 members to live up to the commitments made in June in the Financing for Development Conference in Seville to unlock more finance for developing countries, to triple the lending power of multilateral development banks, to increase their role in leveraging more private finance, to ease debt burdens with new instruments to reduce borrowing costs and risks, and speed up support for countries facing debt distress, drawing on recommendations from my debt expert group. To help developing countries strengthen their capacity to mobilize domestic resources and to build trade bridges, not trade barriers. Too many developing countries, especially in Africa, find themselves at the bottom of value chains or locked out of trade opportunities. G20 members can lead the way by dismantling trade barriers and ensuring trade-free access to their markets for the poorest countries. Meanwhile, inequality has become a cancer in our societies, concentrating power and eroding trust in democracy. I commend the G20 presidency for commissioning a bold report on global inequality. Second, we need climate action. The ongoing COP30 meeting demonstrates how much work needs to be done. Countries have failed to keep temperatures to the 1.5 degree temperature rise limit. Science tells us that a temporary overshoot above this limit is now inevitable. And we must make this overshoot as small, short and safe as possible. Avoiding more climate chaos means bridging the adaptation gap urgently. And that requires a massive scale-up of financing. Developed countries must keep their promises by doubling adaptation finance to at least $40 billion this year and giving confidence that meaningfully increased affordable and accessible adaptation finance will be scaled up beyond 2025. By mobilizing the $300 billion per year promised to developing countries by 2035, and by delivering on the Baku to Blame plan, mobilizing all relevant partners for the $1.3 trillion annually to be achieved in climate finance and in the same time framework for developing countries. Simultaneously, it's time to capitalize the Loss and Damage Fund, including exploring possibilities of innovative finance. And we also need to supercharge the just transition to renewable energy. Last year, 90% of new power capacity came from renewables. Global investment in clean energy reached $2 trillion, 800 billion more than fossil fuels. But only a negligible proportion went to Africa. Africa should be at the heart of this clean energy revolution. The continent holds immense solar and wind potential, but lacks the investments needed to harness them. A just energy transition must also mean to entirely electrify Africa, powering homes, schools, clinics and industries, and creating decent jobs for its young people. No one should be left in the dark by the clean energy age, least of all a continent that has contributed the least to the climate crisis. The economics are on our side, but political will needs to catch up. Fossil fuels still receive vast subsidies. Corporations are pocketing record profits from climate devastation, and lobbyists continue to greenwash the truth, while developing countries are locked out of a greener future. Ensuring that all countries can make this shift means aligning national policies and budgets with a